What is not a bullet you dodged, but a huge tactical nuke you dodged?
In uni, me and my two best friends were drinking, playing Mario Kart and just shooting the sh*t. We were hungry and wanted food. I said let's just make a tombstone pizza because we've been drinking and most delivery services were closed at 1:30 am. One said he's fine to drive. I said no, bad idea. He got the other guy to go with. McDonald's usually doesn't take 2 hours to get, so eventually I went for a scooter ride since McDonald's was less than 2 miles away. I noticed there's a taped-off spot on the bridge right before McDonald's with a crane, cops and an ambulance. They curbed the car and drove it off the bridge and into the shallow creek top first and died on impact. I dodged the nuke of death but ate the bullet of survivor's guilt for nearly 5 years.
The second floor of the house I was renting collapsed a month after I moved out. ETA. Apparently a water pipe sprung a leak shortly after we left. We weren't in any trouble.
When I was 11 I started losing vision in my left eye, and eventually went completely blind in about 2 to 3 weeks. After lots of testing we found that I had a brain tumor in my left optic nerve that would likely spread quickly. They gave me a year and a half to live in the best case scenario with treatment. They got the eye surgically removed, started me on radiation and chemo, and luckily I responded well to it. Cancer's long gone, I'm now a cyclops, and happy to be disease-free.
I had just moved to Colorado by myself, and for whatever reason my mom was encouraging me to get out of the act and go see the new Batman movie. That was the night of the theater shooting, and not only was that the theater but it was also the showing I was considering going to. I stayed up late playing League of Legends instead and woke up to a lot of texts and missed calls. Probably not ideal for my family's blood pressure that I slept in pretty late that day too.
There was an apartment I really wanted, but at the last minute I found a slightly better one. The apartment I almost moved into burned to the ground a month later.
I had some chest pains one night and woke up my wife to tell her. She got a little scared that it might be a heart attack and we agreed that I should go to the ER. The nurses were pretty sure it was a false alarm but would run an EKG as is common practice. In my head I was hoping that the chest pain would come back, not to prove a heart attack, but so that we can find out what the chest pain was. The EKG was done by one veteran nurse and a new nurse. I was watching over their shoulders. Something was flashing on the screen that made both nurses look at each other with disbelief. They ran it again and one nurse went out to the station for help. The other stayed with me and very nicely told my wife and daughter to go back out to the waiting room. A few seconds later 5 to 6 more people came into the room slowly and calmly and began prepping me for something. It turns out that I was having my second heart attack that night in the ER. The doctors and nurses found an obstruction in my heart and were prepping me to have it cleared and a stent placed. When I got out of surgery, the doctor who placed the stent told me, "You probably picked the best time and place to have a heart attack, right here in the ER."
I used to own a gym with a partner. I sold my half of the company and took a boring but stable government job about 3 months before the pandemic.
When I was 16, I had a good friend whose father was a wealthy businessman of some kind. This is Chicago, and I guess his dad started screwing around with the wrong guy's woman. My friend told me it had something to do with the mob or a mobster's wife. I never knew for sure, but do know that I saw firsthand his dad get threatened, at a tennis court of all places, by 2 well-dressed clearly Italian men who drove up in a black Cadillac. I was sitting right there with his friend as they talked to him, and it was exactly as I imagined it would be in the movies. My friend said there was a contract on his dad. He actually said it like it was cool, and at the time, I guess I thought it was too. I was invited to go with him on a fishing trip in Lake Michigan that week, my friend, his dad's friend, and I. 2 days before the fishing trip, something happened with a member of my family and we had to go to Cincinnati for a few days. When I returned, I learned my friend's body was found floating in Lake Michigan. He was wearing a life vest. His father, his father's friend, and the boat were never found. Police questioned me about what I knew and who I'd seen talking to his dad, but I think I was lucky that I said I couldn't describe what they looked like and didn't get wildly specific. Either way, the coolest kid I knew, Chris, was dead. And they never found his dad, the dad's friend or the boat. It was a nice boat on a calm day on Lake Michigan. And something bad happened. Always felt I dodged getting caught up in something I wouldn't have escaped from.
On a road trip in college with 4 friends. We stopped halfway for a pit stop because I had explosive diarrhea and was getting more sick by the minute. Friends carried on to Vegas and left me with one of the guys who rented us a car to return home. The friends that carried on got into a rollover. 1 died, 2 will be injured for life.
Back in college, ex cheated and got preggo. Blamed it on me, involved her family and all. I was willing to file a case in court with medical legal as needed. X got too pressured as I was talking to her dad about medical tests etc. Out of nowhere she admitted that I wasn't the father and it was some classmate she had a fling with.
We went to Thailand in 2003 for Christmas. I spent a number of years there in the early 90s as a kid, and loved it so much that we were gonna do it again the next year. Spend Christmas watching the sun come up on a beach at Phuket again. We had the tickets and everything, but because of some new fallout from an Enron-adjacent scandal, my dad wasn't allowed to leave the country. He wasn't implicated, but was in the C-suite of a credit card company, and all such people were under travel advisory. Anyway, the very hotel we were gonna stay at got 100% wrecked by the tsunamis, so I guess we got lucky.
Back in 2004, when I was only 20 years old, I was on a road trip with my friend and her dog from California to Washington. I was on I-5 North at around 1 a.m., using my cruise control to keep my speed at 75 miles per hour. Speed limit is 70 miles per hour. I'd gotten speeding tickets in that part of Northern California before. I was familiar with this drive because my BF was in LA and I lived in Seattle, so I made that trip a few times a year for a few years. All that is to say, I had learned my lesson and used cruise control to keep myself from speeding. Never going more than 5 over the posted speed limit. So it's pitch black, early morning. My friend has her seat reclined all the way, taking a nap on the passenger side, her dog on her chest. I see what I assume to be lights from a cruiser come up behind me. The car slowly pulls alongside me, and matches my speed exactly. I kept my eyes straight ahead, but I knew this person was staring at me. I wasn't panicking though, not like I had in the past when I'd encountered a cop on I-5, because I knew I wasn't really speeding. I kept glancing at the speedometer to assure myself I was good. I may have even slowed down a notch or two, to be certain. After what felt like an eternity of this cruiser just keeping pace with me, he finally slows down, swerves in behind me, and puts his lights on. As I'm slowing down and pulling off to the shoulder, I nudge my friend awake and tell her I'm getting pulled over. She asks if I was speeding. She knew my history, and I assured her I was not, and had been using cruise control. I was really starting to shake by this point. Cops make most people nervous, but something just didn't feel right about this stop. I knew there was no reason to pull me over. Pitch black, middle of nowhere, hadn't seen a gas station or rest area for miles. The guy strolls up to the passenger side of my car as my friend is using the lever to get her seat upright again. When he finally gets to the passenger side window, he looks visibly surprised that I have a passenger. He begins to fumble over his words, claims that I was going 90 miles per hour. He was so damn flustered he forgot to ask for my license. I actually asked him if he needed it. He trots back to his car and my friend and I look at each other like, WTF? Her dog, BTW, was going absolutely apecrap during this entire interaction. I never saw that dog act like that before or after this happened. Now remember, I'd gotten a few tickets on that same stretch of road, within that same year or two. I was very familiar with this process and knew how long it should take and what to expect. In my previous experience, most cops go back to their cruisers for a good 6 to 8 minutes. This guy came back after about 2 minutes, kinda tossed my license and registration into my friend's lap, like he was annoyed, and yelled at me to slow down and told me he'd just give me a verbal warning for now. I thanked him, despite how creepy it was, and while I was putting my license back in my wallet and registration back in my glove compartment, he fired up his cruiser and floored it back onto the highway. This is also not normal. Anytime I'd been pulled over, they would always tell me to pull out ahead of them, so they could make sure I merged carefully back onto the freeway. My friend and I were freaked. She was more freaked than me. I think I was trying to explain it away, give him the benefit of the doubt, at first. But the longer I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I became. I couldn't shake that nasty feeling that something wasn't quite right. Fast forward many years later, I remember hearing about some cop that had been arrested. He'd been trolling I-5 North in Northern California. During that same time period I'd been on road trips, stopping unsuspecting young single female motorists, and sexually assaulting them in his cruiser. His MO was to pull up alongside their cars, scan them to make sure they were single females, and pull them over in desolate areas at early morning hours. He ended up murdering one of these girls when she put up too much of a fight. I can't remember his name and I don't know what he looked like. It was too dark to see his face well. But my blood turned cold when I'd heard that. Definitely dodged a huge nuclear life-changing, possibly life-ending, event thanks to my tired friend and her protective little dog.
My father-in-law was working on construction of a power plant and was scheduled work Sunday, was a union pipe fitter. Saturday he got a call from another company asking him to run a job much closer to his house. Think 5-minute commute versus 50, so he accepted and didn't go to the power plant job Sunday. That day there was an explosion at the plant and people in the crew he was working with wound up getting killed.
24 years old, had a pesky sore on my tongue that was really bothering me. My boyfriend's dad was a dentist, so when I was over at his house one night I asked him to take a look. He recommended I go see an oral surgeon the next day for him to check it out. The next day I decided it was feeling better, so I tried to cancel my APPT, but my boyfriend's dad insisted I go. I went, and the oral surgeon pretty much diagnosed it as cancer on the spot. It was aggressive, and by the time of my surgery to remove it, it had already spread to multiple lymph nodes. They ended up removing over half my tongue, followed by chemo and radiation. Given how aggressive it was, I often think that if I had put off the doctor's visit any longer I probably wouldn't have survived. I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary in January.
I was moving abroad to do a post-grad degree. My flight was to leave out of Newark early morning on 9/11. A family friend who worked in the towers kept prodding me to move my flight to the afternoon and come visit him in the office so he could show me around. My parents were pressuring me to go as well since it was a good networking opportunity. I was on the fence, but decided not to since I was a poor student and didn't want to pay the cab fare from my hotel in NJ to Lower Manhattan. Our friend made it out, thankfully, and I'm guessing I would have but no way would I want that experience burned in my memory.
I was briefly engaged to a man who has since cheated on his gorgeous, intelligent, sweet wife hundreds of times. They are separated but have 2 children and will likely reconcile. I broke our engagement when he said that he thought it was perfectly okay for a man to cheat on his wife if they'd been married for a while and he'd gotten bored. Oddly enough, he didn't believe a woman was entitled to do the same. I feel so badly for his poor wife now. He began cheating on her 2 years into their marriage when she was pregnant with their first child.
My wife and I were prepared to buy a nice riverfront property in 2019, but the owners, her dad and uncle, were dragging their feet. We had our down payment, we were approved for the mortgage, and we had even been living there paying rent. Then the river rose 30 feet, 10 meters, and we had to evacuate. The water kept rising. The house was destroyed before we bought it. So we didn't buy it.
Guy on Grindr I was chatting with looked cute and we were chatting. He was too far though, and I was a student who didn't have a car, could not host in dorms. He was later arrested for purposely spreading HIV through Grindr hookups. This was in Edinburgh.
Nuke dodge number 1. X had some type of breakdown. I woke up with her standing over me with a butcher knife. She in some sort of catatonic state. I didn't move. I don't think she saw that I was awake. Then she left the room after a while. Came back into our bedroom sans butcher knife. Got in bed. Snuggled me until it was time to get up. Then she made me some great waffles for breakfast, as cheerful as ever. Didn't get stabbed but still have trouble sleeping unless I'm alone in the room. Nuke dodge number 2. Another ex cheated on me. She had wanted a baby. We both did, TBH. So she ended up getting married to the dude she cheated on me with. They had a baby. Then she cheated on him and they got divorced. So wife's boyfriend is paying the child support. Life is freaking good.
I met a girl one summer and she fell head over heels for me. She even ditched her fiancé for me, but when she went back home at the end of summer they got back together, and got married. I saw her again the following summer, and she wanted to pick up where we left off, but I said no. I ran into her years later. She told me all about her sex life, and how her husband could no longer satisfy her, so she was hooking up with random strangers from the internet while he slept in the spare room. They had 2 kids by that time. I felt sorry for them.
I interviewed at a company in NH that made jams, baking mixes, lollipops, etc. for a technical job. The president, the owner's daughter, spent most of the interview dumping on their current consultant and making fun of all things, his degrees. That initially turned me off. Then, speaking with the owner, he makes it a point to take a call and tell the person on the other end, "I'll pay you when I pay you." Cash flow issues? His question about my education was, "What can your fancy degrees do for me?" Then, when I met the VP of marketing, she asks me how many recalls I've done. None, that's not what I do. Wait, what interview is this? I decline their offer. Fast forward maybe 5 years. I'm talking to a guy about doing some consulting work for him and we get in the subject of this company. He had interviewed there as well. He also got the vibe and declined. Turns out, they were planning on selling the company and were beefing it up for appearances. It also turns out, after the sale, that they had spent the previous months sending current clients to their next endeavor. They almost went to jail for their financial and business shenanigans. Would not have been happy to get caught in that mess.
Walking to work in the winter. Halfway through a step forward under a sky bridge when an icicle taller than me, 6, and probably 2 feet around at the base crashes down right in front of my nose. If my bus had been a half second earlier, if I had walked even a tiny bit faster pace, I would have been impaled from brains to balls. I was frozen in place for a minute, quietly surveying my near death. There was another pedestrian nearby who witnessed it, and the wide-eyed, ashen look on his face as he stared at me confirmed just how narrowly fortunate I was that day.
I married my high school sweetheart when I was 23 and she was 21. We had been together for roughly 5 years at that time and were madly in love. We were married in April and she announced in mid to late May that she was pregnant. She had taken a test with her friend after feeling sick. I was so happy and excited that I didn't take the time to ask to see the test. She had just thrown it away. Fast forward a bit and she wouldn't let me attend doctor's visits, and I gave her the benefit of the doubt for privacy and the such. But then she wasn't getting bigger at even the 6-month mark. I was suspicious and confronted her about it, and she went off on me with the standard barrage of, "How could you? And don't you trust me?" And she pointed out some weight gain. I was skeptical but loving and supportive of my wife. She had a rough life growing up and I felt as if I needed to be more patient and understanding. I reminded her that I will help her find help if she's not really pregnant. That I would love and support her and we would work through it. She said it wasn't necessary. Wifey started gaining weight more, especially in the belly, so I kept going moving forward as if she was pregnant. We had a name picked out, a full wardrobe of the first 3 clothing sizes, a fully decked out bedroom, etc. My family was suspicious but still supportive. Around month 8 it was painfully obvious she was not pregnant. I had already found her ultrasounds on Google, the weight gain stopped, she had a pancreas issue that she couldn't even eat enough to gain much weight, she had to be making herself sick to gain, and our relationship was deteriorating fast. I was remarkably patient. The due date came and went and I asked what the doctor was saying. "Oh, it's okay. The baby can sometimes be up to 2 weeks past due." And I had my date. I gave it 2 weeks and then laid down the cold hard truth. "Go to the hospital with me to see what's up with the baby, pregnancy or I'm gone right now." She went. I was not allowed to go back with her. She requested the doctors do not share with me. Wifey had told the doctors that she was there for an issue related to her pancreas issues. Never mentioned the possible pregnancy. I was permitted to visit her in her room and I looked her in the eye and told her it was over. I took the bullet, or rather shotgun blast, from that issue. But I avoided being gaslit and manipulated for the rest of my life.
My manager was trying to have me fired for underperformance, and I was so depressed at the time that I believed I was an awful employee. The place I work has a whole song and dance routine just to get someone a verbal warning, let alone fired, so she tried to get me to take a severance payment so that I'd leave and save her the trouble. I had to take sick leave shortly after that conversation, and while I was gone, she initiated the formal process to have me fired. I was able to drag things out for a couple of months, and during that time, I discovered she'd falsified documents to make me look like a lost cause. Presenting a dossier to HR demonstrating her statements were provably misleading, and documenting every time she failed to follow proper procedures turned everything around. I got moved to a better job on a better team, and spent a solid year rubbing it in her face how well I was doing, and ensuring it got back to her whenever I got praise from the department head. It was pretty annoying that she didn't get fired, but there would have been too much blowback on management if she had. Still, I went from the verge of unemployment to unequivocal success.